Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time you sent us a really cool article summarizing a YouTube poker coaching session.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one.
It's fascinating stuff. And I think
Definitely.
a lot of people might hear poker and think, oh, this is about gambling or cards or something.
Right, yeah.
But it goes so much deeper than that. We're going to be talking about strategy,
Absolutely.
human behavior, and even some kind of surprising connections to the wider financial world.
That's right. It's not just about learning how to play poker. It's more about looking at the principles behind how we make decisions,
Yeah,
how we analyze information, how we try to understand what other people are thinking and doing.
right.
And the thing is, these are all skills that are valuable, not just at the poker table, but in all areas of life,
Absolutely.
whether it's business, investing, relationships, even just everyday decision making.
So our mission today, and I think this will be fun,
Yeah.
is to pull out the key insights from this coaching session so we can understand these concepts of strategic analysis, behavioral patterns, and see if we can connect these seemingly disparate things together.
Exactly. So just to give everyone a quick overview, this coaching session featured a player who shared their hand histories from online poker,
Okay.
and they were using a software tool that tracks all kinds of stats about their play. The coach zeroed in on a few key metrics to help this player identify areas for improvement.
Okay, so let's jump into the nitty-gritty here. The article starts by talking about this player's flop continuation bet frequency.
Right, or a C-bet for short.
Too bad. Okay. And that was sitting at 45%.
Yep,
Now, for those of us who don't spend all our time at the poker tables,
sure.
can you explain what that actually means and why it was considered a bit low in this case?
Absolutely. So a flop continuation bet is basically when you bet after the first three community cards are dealt. That's the flop. And you were the person who made the last bet before the flop. Now, a 45% bet frequency means this player was only betting after the flop, about 45% of the time when they had the betting lead pre-flop,
Okay.
which, particularly in heads-up situations where it's just you against one opponent,
Yeah.
is generally considered on the low side.
Okay, and why is that?
Well, there are a couple of key reasons. First, when you bet on the flop,
Yeah.
it lets you extract more value when you actually have a strong hand. You're essentially making your opponent pay to see if they can beat you.
Makes sense.
But the second reason is even more interesting. It's about something called fold equity.
Okay, I've heard that term before.
Right. Fold equity basically means you have the potential to win the hand even if you don't have the best cards at that moment,
Okay.
simply by betting and making your opponent fold their hand. So by betting more often on the flop,
You're putting more pressure on your opponent?
exactly, you force them to make tough decisions.
Hmm.
They have to decide whether to risk more chips by calling your bet, even if they're not sure if their hand is good enough.
So it's not just about having good cards, it's about creating situations where you can win even when you don't.
Precisely. It's a more aggressive strategy that can be very effective.
Okay, so the coach is recommending more aggression on the flop. Got it. Then they looked at how often this player was betting on the river.
Right, the river being the fifth and final community card.
Yep.
And this is where things got a bit flipped around. The player's river bet frequency was a hefty 71%.
Wow, so almost the opposite. That's a lot of betting.
It is. And in this case, too much.
So, what are the potential problems of having such a high river bet frequency?
Well, the river is kind of the moment of truth in a poker hand.
Okay.
It's your last chance to bet, to either try and get more value with a strong hand or maybe pull off a bluff if you think you can convince your opponent you have something you don't. Now, if you're betting 71% of the time on the river, it strongly suggests you're betting too often with hands that just aren't strong enough to warrant that kind of aggression.
So, you might be betting with weak hands, hoping you can win anyway.
Exactly. Or you might be bluffing too often when the situation just doesn't really call for it. Either way, it makes you very exploitable,
Exploitable meaning.
meaning that savvy opponents will figure out that you're betting a lot, even when you're likely to have a weak hand.
Hmm.
They'll start calling your bets more often, even with hands that wouldn't normally be considered that strong, because they know you're probably bluffing or just trying to steal the pot with a mediocre hand.
Ah, so you end up losing more money in the long run.
Exactly. You're essentially giving away chips to players who are paying attention and know how to take advantage of that tendency.
Okay, so we've got not betting enough on the flop, betting too much on the river, and then there's this river fold frequency, which was at 30% and also considered to be too low. What's the thinking behind that one?
Right, so this ties into what we were just talking about. If you're folding too infrequently on the river, it suggests you're calling bets, even when there's a good chance you're beaten,
Okay.
especially against players who are known to bet aggressively on the river.
Yeah.
A 30% fold frequency indicates you might be calling with hands that are just too weak to win.
Hmm.
And again, this can be a very costly mistake. You're essentially paying off your opponents when they have strong hands.
Got it. So the coach is seeing this pattern of too passive on the flop, too aggressive on the river, and they recommend what the article calls this strategic inversion.
Right. Bet more on the flop,
Uh-huh.
bet less on the river.
And fold more on the river.
Precisely. It's almost like a counterintuitive approach. A lot of people might think you should save your big bets for when you feel really confident.
Yeah, I can see that.
But the logic behind this strategic inversion is all about maximizing your potential gains early on and minimizing your losses when the situation is less favorable.
I'm starting to see how this connects to decision-making beyond poker as well. It's about knowing when to push your advantage and when to cut your losses.
Absolutely. Recognizing those key moments where a shift in strategy is needed can make a huge difference, whether you're playing cards or navigating a complex business deal.
Now, beyond the specific numbers and poker strategies, the article highlighted some really interesting meta-teaching moments that I think are worth exploring.
Definitely.
The first one that stood out was this idea that stats a truth in isolation.
Yes, that's a crucial one. It basically means that while statistics can be incredibly useful tools, they don't always tell the whole story.
Right. It's not enough to just look at the numbers without understanding the context.
Exactly. So for example, that 45% CP that we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
that might be perfectly reasonable in a very loose game,
Loose meaning.
meaning a game where people tend to call bets with weaker hands
Oh.
or against certain types of opponents who are known for being very passive.
So you have to adapt your strategy based on the situation.
Exactly. There's no magic number that guarantees success in every scenario. It's about understanding the nuances and adjusting your approach accordingly.
Which leads perfectly into the second meta-teaching point, reading between the numbers.
Yes. It's not just about seeing the data, it's about interpreting it correctly,
Right.
thinking critically about what those numbers actually mean. The article uses the example of a went to showdown 50% statistic.
Yeah.
By itself, that number doesn't actually tell you much. Does the player win a lot of those showdowns?
Oh.
Or do they lose most of them? If they win a high percentage, it could mean they're very good at getting value with strong hands.
Got it.
But if they're constantly losing, it might indicate that they're calling bets with weak hands and hoping to get lucky, which is rarely a winning strategy in the long run.
So it's all about the bigger picture. You need to connect those different data points to make sense of them.
Absolutely. And this is something that's so important in any field where you're dealing with data.
Oh, I see.
Whether it's analyzing business trends, interpreting scientific research, or even just trying to understand the information you see on social media.
Don't just take the numbers at face value.
Right. Think critically, question the assumptions, and look for those connections that reveal the real story.
Now, this is where the coaching session takes a pretty wild turn, but a really fascinating one, I think. They start talking about a documentary on this Russian cannabis investment pyramid scheme. I mean, that's not what I expected when I started reading about poker strategy.
I know, right? It's a bit of a left turn, but it makes a really powerful point.
Okay, tell me more.
So this documentary was about a guy who basically pretended to be trading in the cannabis industry, but was actually running a huge Ponzi scheme. He managed to con people out of hundreds of millions of dollars.
Wow.
And the coach was struck by how easily this guy, and people like him, can attract huge amounts of capital compared to people who are genuinely trying to create something of value, building businesses, offering real products and services.
Hey, that's a really interesting observation.
It is.
Yeah.
And it gets you thinking about, why are people so easily drawn to these kinds of schemes? What is it about these con artists that allows them to be so successful, often at the expense of honest, hardworking people?
And the article suggests there might be some uncomfortable parallels with certain aspects of the financial world. I think the quote was something like, some legitimate institutions bear a structural resemblance to outright Ponzi schemes.
Right. And I think it's important to clarify here. The article isn't saying that all financial institutions are scams.
Right, of course.
But it's pointing out that there are certain systems,
Yeah.
whether it's traditional pension systems or even the way some banks operate, where they rely on a constant influx of new money to meet their existing obligations, which, structurally speaking, has some similarities to how a Ponzi scheme works.
Right. those systems need constant growth to keep going.
Exactly. And without that growth, they can become unsustainable. Now, obviously, there are important differences in terms of regulation and oversight.
Of course, and intent.
Right. But the coach is raising a thought-provoking point about the inherent potential for instability in systems that depend heavily on continuous expansion.
Okay, so we've got this idea of systems that might be more fragile than they appear.
Right.
And then the article talks about a gradient of ethical gray zones, which I thought was a really interesting phrase.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
It's basically saying that the line between what's clearly a scam and what's considered legitimate business isn't always so clear-cut.
Right.
There's a whole spectrum of behavior in between. And often, success in those gray areas depends more on presentation, persuasion, and the ability to create a compelling narrative
Yeah.
than on the actual substance of what's being offered.
So charisma can be a powerful tool for deception as well.
Absolutely. And the article highlights this idea that being really good at sales
Huh?
doesn't necessarily mean you're providing something of genuine value.
Right, you can be a fantastic salesperson selling something that's ultimately harmful or unsustainable.
Exactly. Which brings us back to poker, believe it or not.
Okay, I'm curious to see how this connects.
Well, in poker, you've got bluffing, which is a form of deception, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to convince your opponent that you have something you don't. Then there's the timing of your bets,
Oh,
how you present yourself at the table, what's known as your table image.
okay.
All of these things can be used strategically to gain an advantage. And in situations where the rules are less clear, where ethics are maybe a bit more fluid,
Yeah.
those same skills can be used for manipulation, for taking advantage of people's trust.
It's fascinating how these seemingly very different worlds, poker and financial fraud, can actually shed light on similar aspects of human psychology.
Absolutely. It's all about understanding how people make decisions under pressure,
Yeah.
how we respond to incentives, and how our emotions can sometimes lead us to make choices that aren't necessarily in our best interest.
So how can we take all these lessons from the poker table and apply them to our own lives, even if we never intend to play a hand of poker?
Great question. And the article actually offers some concrete advice in a section called Actionable Learning Beyond Poker.
Oh, perfect.
The first point is review your frequencies.
Okay, so that was about betting and folding in poker, but what does it mean more broadly?
It's about taking a step back
Yeah.
and looking at your own patterns of behavior,
Okay.
your habits, your tendencies in different areas of life. Ask yourself, where are you overcommitting? Where are you perhaps being too cautious?
I like that.
Are you spending too much time and energy on things that aren't giving you much in return?
Right.
Are you holding back from opportunities where a more assertive approach might be beneficial? It's about becoming more aware of how you allocate your resources, your time, your money, your attention,
Yeah.
and making sure those allocations are aligned with your goals and values.
So it's about looking at your own personal stats in a way.
Exactly. Track your time, pay attention to your energy levels. Notice where you feel most engaged and where you feel drained. That can give you valuable insights into where you might need to make some adjustments.
That's a great point. The next action item was contextualize data, which builds on what we were talking about earlier.
Right. Always try to understand the why behind the numbers.
Okay.
Don't just accept information at face value.
Right, especially in today's world where we are bombarded with data from all directions.
Exactly. Whether it's business metrics, financial reports, health statistics, or even just the news headlines, always dig a little deeper. Ask yourself, what are the assumptions behind this data? Who collected it? What are their biases? What might be missing from the picture?
It's about developing that critical thinking muscle.
Exactly. And not being swayed by surface-level information without really understanding the context.
Now, the third point was focus on challenging scenarios, which I found really interesting. In poker, the coach recommended the player review more heads-up situations.
Right, one-on-one.
Because that's where you have to make very precise decisions and really try to understand your opponent. But how does that translate to other areas of life?
Well, the idea is that by tackling difficult situations,
Yeah.
where you're forced to adapt and make tough choices under pressure, you develop a more robust decision-making framework that you can then apply to other areas. So in life, this might mean seeking out challenges that push you beyond your comfort zone, whether it's learning a new skill, taking on a complex project at work, or even just having a difficult conversation that you've been avoiding.
So it's about embracing the hard stuff.
Exactly.
Right.
Because that's often where the greatest growth happens.
The final actionable point was embrace philosophical parallels, which really resonated with me.
Yeah, I like that one too. It's about seeing connections between seemingly unrelated areas
Yeah.
and using those connections to deepen your understanding of complex ideas. Like, who would have thought that a poker coaching session would lead to a discussion about financial systems and Ponzi schemes?
Right. But those unexpected connections can be incredibly insightful.
Absolutely. So look for those opportunities to draw parallels between different areas of your life, between your personal experiences and the things you observe in the world around you. It can open up whole new ways of thinking and problem solving.
Now, I know we've covered a lot of ground here, but I want to circle back to the coach's main takeaways for the player.
Oh yeah, the core poker stuff.
Yeah. The article ends with this very succinct summary. You don't bet enough on the flop, and you bet too much on the river. You also fold too much on the flop and not enough on the river. It's simple, but kind of profound when you think about it.
It is. It cuts right to the heart of the matter.
Right.
And as we've discussed, the real value isn't just in knowing what to do, but in understanding the why behind those recommendations.
Exactly. Why is it beneficial to be more aggressive in certain situations and more cautious in others? What are the underlying principles at play?
And how can we apply those principles to make better decisions, not just in poker, but in all aspects of life?
Well, this deep dive into the world of poker coaching has definitely revealed some surprisingly universal truths about strategy, data analysis, and human behavior.
It really has. And it leaves you with some important things to think about.
So here's a final thought for everyone listening.
Okay.
Consider a situation in your own life right now where you might be overcommitting,
Okay.
putting in a lot of effort, but not seeing much return. Maybe it's a project at work,
Hmm.
a relationship that's draining your energy,
Yeah.
or even just a bad habit you can't seem to break. Now, at the same time, think about an area where you might be holding back,
Okay.
where being more assertive, more proactive could lead to positive change.
Got it.
How could you apply this idea of a strategic inversion to your own life? Could you reduce your effort in that first area,
Hmm.
the one that's not giving you much back, and redirect that energy towards something that has more potential?
It's a powerful question to ask yourself.
It is, and we encourage you to really explore it. Think about the why behind your current patterns of action and reaction. Challenge yourself to see if a strategic shift might be beneficial.
And if you have any aha moments,
Yeah.
we'd love to hear about them.
We're always fascinated by how these seemingly specific examples can have such broad and unexpected applications in our lives. So until next time,
Happy strategizing.
keep those deep dive suggestions coming.
My plan for our lesson today was to review the hands you marked for review and then also to mark some heads up hands also, if we have time for that. Because I do think heads up is an important stage of the tournament. What's your impression? How often do you think you get third, second? Is
I
it
don't-
tough to tell that? Yeah.
I don't know. Can't you not check? Can you not check with hands to note?
Yeah, I mean, usually you could, right? But we tried to check different things there last time, and it's a bit difficult for it to understand all that there. But we can try to look there, yes. Hopefully we can see that. We'll see that.
Yep. Okay. So I do a screen share.
Sounds good. I watched the documentary this morning. I think it was called Jail Shoot now. I forget what it was called, but it was about Russian mafia scam investing site, which won or made 600 millions, I think. And people could invest in cannabis growing, but investing there, it was just, pyramid scheme.
Yeah. But you know what is that there are always people who manage to pull that off. If I would go and do nothing and tell people to put money into something where I do nothing, nobody would put any money into my fund or into my investing scheme. Nobody would. So I'm always quite surprised that people pull it off. I mean, Madoff did the same. He also pretended to be a trader and to have a trading strategy that makes a lot of money. He didn't take any position in the market. He just took the money and paid people out as long as he could. And when there was no more money left to pay people out, well, then everybody lost all the money they put in. So it was also a Ponzi. But those people are very talented because for Madoff, he had clients who put 100 millions, 200 millions, 400 millions into his thing. And the guy never did anything, It's just amazing. I work hard and I cannot find a client and they do nothing and they find clients who give them 100 million. How is that possible?
But well, yes. I mean, in the documentary, they also worked very hard. They went into these conventions. They had a nice headquarters. They also had like fake partners and fake places to grow cannabis, and they even had some fake. Well, they did a lot of work, right? To like they legally registered in places and bought properties and all of that. It's just, but it was all a facade there. That actually they
those people are actually good sales. They are good at selling something, you know? And if the underlying thing doesn't exist, it doesn't matter to them because they have no moral, they have no principle. But they are really good at selling stuff.
Right. So if they used it in a good way, they could actually sell a real business in a good way, right?
Yeah, but then they make less money and then it's not interesting. If you do a real business, you make maybe 1%, like maybe 1.2%, or you make 2.5%. With that, there's not much you can do, you know? And you need a lot of capital to start. It's not sure that it's sustainable. Most fail. So it's not really sustainable. When 98%, I don't know exactly the numbers for businesses, but it's also close to, I think, 98% of people who fail. So it's not sustainable for everybody. Some, yes. There are always some exceptions. There are always some Microsoft, some Facebook, some Google, you know? But for most people, it's not that sustainable.
But aren't the banking system and pension fund system also pyramid schemes in a way?
Yeah. But there's a difference. The state can print as much money as he wants. So when there's no more money in the pension fund, they just print some more and put some more in. And then people get some more money. But that doesn't mean that you can buy a lot with the money you receive. Because if you do that too much, then the money has no more value. You go into hyperinflation. And then you can buy nothing with the money they send you. But no, it's all a scam because it's mathematically based on an underlying principle that is a scam. So it's all a scam. But there are different levels of scam, you know? If I tell you put your money into something where I know that you will lose everything, then there's something wrong with my morals. There's something wrong. I should not sell you something like this, you know?
Are you a big believer in stuff like gold or silver then because they're limited and you can't just print more of them?
It's better if it's limited, yes. It is better.
Yeah, all right.
Doesn't solve all the problems, but it is much better. If you can choose, you should have something that has something real in it, not something you can print into oblivion.
Okay. Thank you for sharing this thought.
Yeah, I always told you, Norman, when you want, we can once only talk about the markets. I can show you what I do, and we can talk about fundamentals. You can ask me now a question about fundamentals or about technicals.
The only thing is I'm not sure I'll have good questions about it, but we can try.
Yeah, you sure do. I'm sure you do. If you're interested.
Next time then maybe.
If you're interested in it. But I have to prepare, so you have to tell me in advance because I must select a couple of charts and see what we want to talk about. Maybe we don't look at charts. Maybe you want only have to have a discussion without looking at any charts. But it's more interesting if we look at charts, I think at least. So if you want to do it...
Maybe next time. I hope I have next week a bit more time. We'll see.
Okay, but just tell me in advance so I will select something in case you don't have enough questions.
Okay. Well, if we run out of questions, we can just talk about something else. But yeah.
Okay, those are my marked hands for this week. But we don't want to...
There's an hour ago from, right? That's interesting. So if you click here tournament results on the page you were on, does it show anything interesting there? It's at the bottom half of this. Yeah, this 1.621. You see, the nice thing is that green number there, win rate, expected value, which is a positive number there. So actually that shows that yes. Yeah, I mean the green number that's next to the thing that just popped up.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know if he even knows that the first 2-3 places get some money, you know, get a prize. I'm not sure he even knows that. So how good can the information he gives us be if he doesn't know?
That is true.
What do you want me to click on?
Well, actually, I think it's a little bit interesting, the stuff in this table that you're hovering over. So if you scroll there, use the scrolling bar and don't scroll down. or up, stay where you were, but scroll to the side. Yeah. Then, there's that green number 2.8 there, which is a solid number as well. And then it's when to showdown. That's how often the cards get turned over. And then how often you win that showdown. 50. That's the first number that usually is nice if it's a little more than 50, but 50 is not too bad. It just means that when cards are turned over, so far it's 50-50 whether you win it. Ideally, it would be 55 or a little more than 50. Then the next number is 1 when so flop, and that you have 40. And that's a very large number. So that's actually good for you, that if you see the flop, winning these pots very often. So maybe that even implies that, well, it's tough to say, right? Just based on a statistic, what to change. But based on that, you can be quite comfortable seeing the flop, that you're doing usually quite well and when you do get to the flop. So yes, just some statistics here on this really. I wonder what statistics it shows you in the second main tab from the top, that connection icon there. I somehow remember we looked into that one. It's on the very left-hand side where there isn't text. It's just the icons. Yeah, even more left. Yes, under that. It's the main statistics hub here. And I think we have looked into this, right? This is your opponent statistics here. If you switch it to yourself just for a moment, so click all players and select yourself. Just let's take a moment for me to see if there's something here that needs addressing based on the statistics themselves. Yeah, but I should think also about, I guess what instantly draws my attention is the river statistics for post-flop section. So it's at the bottom of the table. And you have a very high frequency of betting again on the river, 71%. And you also have a very low frequency of folding, the 30%. So that actually does concern me a bit, that you're betting so often on rivers, and also that you're folding so rarely on the rivers, right? So it's kind of a twofold issue I see with these numbers, that when someone else bets the river, you're not folding very often, but also when you do bet the river, you seem to do that a lot of the time. But, sometimes numbers say one thing, but it's what numbers are like also depends what the opponents are like, right? If opponents bet very small bets on the river, well, that means you're going to fold rarely on the river. So that's why I'm not super fixated on just getting the correct numbers for every slot. But it's very likely though, that you are betting a bit on the river as much as you could on some scenarios, right? Sometimes straights and flushes come in, someone bets big, and you should let your top pairs go on the river if someone bets. And the other thing I see is your flop continuation bet 45, which is on a lower side. If anything, flop is the time where you could continuation bet quite often. What are possible reasons why you should bet less often on the flop is if very often you see the flop with multiple opponents. So if most likely you see the flop and there's 2 or 3 other players, then it makes sense to be cautious there. But especially once you play heads up hands or there's only one opponent, you should be betting, even you could bet 50% more on the flop. That would be more common strategy for flop. So in a way you could reverse your river and flop continuation bet statistics here, bet more often on the flops and less often on rivers, and also call more often on flops and fold more often on rivers. That is very abstract what I'm talking about, but I do think it's helpful for me in that when we review our hands, I will be addressing that, right? I will be noticing if there's more opportunities you could bet on the flop or more opportunities you should fold the river or not bet the river. But maybe it's good for you as well to be mindful of that maybe you're not betting the flop as often as you could. Maybe you're betting the river a bit more often than you should. All right. I mean, otherwise, a lot of stats here are looking quite good, which I would expect, right? That as your plays make more sense, the stats will align themselves more. And yeah, I mean, these ones are quite okay as well. So yeah, this would be for now. The main things I draw your attention to is the continuation betting and folding to continuation bet numbers. How would you summarize this long-winded, repetitive talk I just did?
I don't bet enough on the flop and I bet too much on the river.
Yes. Yes, I mean, you could say that. And also, you fold a little bit too much on the flop and you don't fold enough on the river.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah, well, well, it's the other side of the coin there, right? But it's not like, how to say it, it's not something that's gonna, it's incremental changes. If these numbers were 10% more or 10% less, it doesn't mean you're making mistakes every hand, but it looks like there are scenarios where they bet half pot on the flop and you have some overcard, some backdoor flush draw, and you could stay in that pot, or you have some lower pair with 3 to a straight, 3 to a flush, and you could call that half pot bet on the flop. And then likely there's some river hands where it isn't likely. I would guess with the river, I think you're betting so often on the river. My assumption would be that if you had top pair, you're betting it flop, turn, and river. But really, you should ask yourself, river, that are there enough worse hands that will call me at that point? So on the flop, someone could call a draw, could call maybe second pair, maybe even third pair. On the turn, maybe also they would call weaker stuff. But then on the river again, it's often that there really isn't value there for another bet, and that would be the case if you bet and they just fold all their weaker stuff and call a better stuff, right? So there could be scenarios where you're on the river, you bet, and 8 times they fold, and you could say, well, what was the issue with the bet? They folded 8 times. Well, but if they fold 8 times, you won't win any extra chips by that bet. And if those 2 times they do call with something better or go for a raise, then actually you would have been better off to not bet the river and to just turn over your cards and win there those 8 times and not lose more those 2 times. And that actually ties together with that stat I mentioned previously of 1 at showdown, which yours was 50. That would increase a bit more if you wouldn't be going for these, they're called thin value bets on the river. Bets which it looks like you have the best hand, but it doesn't really look like many worse hands will call that anymore. If in these spots you just check and turn over your cards instead of them folding, then you would win more at showdown. You would bet less often on rivers, and possibly you would also be more protected against tricky players, right? So there's multiple facets of, I mean, it's actually quite common. I don't know how it is in trading, but with poker, it's often like this, that fixing one stat might also fix 2 or 3 other stats because they're all interlinked and connected one way or another.
Okay.
All right. So I think that's good for now. I have a better sense also what it does here. So we'll do more of this stuff in the future. I'll try to figure out how to see how often you get third, second, first. I think that would be good. And I'll also try to figure out some other things we could do with that, with your bet online hands. But for now, let's review those hands here. And I'm especially interested to review the hands from 2 hours ago. All right, another bubble spot, right? So, and already what's interesting about this is stacks are very equal and everyone has quite a few chips. Quite a few, I guess that can sound like a lot in English, but everyone has short stacks. So even your 3 big blinds is just 2 big blinds less than the biggest stack on the table currently with 5. So 3 big blinds is big amount of all the chips in the game. And I assume you went all in here after player 2 folded. And I think I would have done the same. But if player 2 if player 2 does anything, then I wouldn't go all in anymore. If player 2 even limps, if he raises especially. But if he didn't do that, I think on the button, you would normally open ace-8 on the button. I do think you can go all in here. Hopefully they'll fold. But if they don't fold, I mean, just winning this pot would put you in second place in chips, right? So it's quite a good, like a consequential all in here. If they all fold, you're in a very good path to make top 3, top 2, even win it. If they call, I mean, you still have ace-8. It's not like you have no chance of a hand. And yeah, I mean, to wait, I mean, it's tough to wait with 3 big blinds. I would only wait here if you think the other players are completely crazy, that in the next 2 hands, for sure, they will go all in, which is possible, right? It's tough for them to not go all in if they have 4 and 5 chips. But if they just don't do that the next 2 hands, then that would be a disaster for us. So, right? Yeah, and now I do think you did make a mistake here. I said that if player 2 does anything, then we shouldn't oblige here. And still, you know, even me going all in, even if he folded, I was a bit hesitant. I was still considering to maybe wait out this. But why I was going for this is, there was just 2 players to get through, and there was a decent chance that both player 8 and player 1 don't have an ace, and they might have just like king 3, 7, 6, some random hands, and they fold. There was I would say like at least 2 times out of 3 chance that both of them fold, and you would have won the hand with an all-in. Now, once player 2 is already all in, now there's no chance that it won't get into an all-in. So it comes back to this, I would say it's the cornerstone philosophy of a good tournament player, is that all-ins are most of the time just to scare the other players off. And so all-ins is a lot about who goes all in first. But once someone is all in, we really don't want to engage in those unless we have no other chance, or if our hand is so strong that we think that it's a favorable fight for us, right? So, but we really don't want to get in scenarios where we're 50-50 all in, or we're even a little less than 50-50. And in this case, I wouldn't even say we're 50-50. I think his all in is quite strong here, and ace-8 offsuit one of the weaker hands. So I do think you could have waited more here and folded this.
The thing is, it's a tournament where they were playing a lot, but mostly limping. And there were 8 pairs left, and they all had like 8 or 9 big blinds, and everybody was playing all the time, and I was only folding because I had bad hands. So 8 ace was probably the best hand I have seen during the entire tournament. And I thought, well, since it went so bad until 3.38, if now I fold and it continues bad, man, well, then the only hope I have is that they kicked themselves out. So I thought ace-8 was okay to go all in. Because also, when they went all in, especially player 8, he did everything and whatever. Like 9-2 offsuit. So he played every copy hand possible. So, well, for me, it's just where if I keep on waiting, I thought it was bad, but it was the bubble, and maybe because of that, I should have folded.
Here's something I think is quite...
But by far, I'm the guy who folds the most, and passes the most hands. By far. There's nobody who does that, who does as much folding as I do.
Well, that's also the reason why you have the best results in these games out of your opponents, right? I imagine they're all losing more than you are in these games. What I think is the key detail about what you said is, look how far you got in this tournament without playing the hand, right? You didn't have any opportunities to have aces and double up. You had a tournament with no opportunities, and you made it this far into top 4, where you're actually very close to the average stack, right? The average stack in this spot is something like 4 point something big blinds. You're just 1 big blind from the average. and you had a disastrous run of hands in a tournament. So really, to me, that's an ideal tournament. To me, an ideal tournament is where you sit down, all the players go crazy and just knock each other's out, and suddenly you're top 3, you're top 2, and you didn't have to do anything. Now I'm exaggerating this a little bit, but I do think if that was how the tournament had gone so far, there's a good chance all 3 of them who are left will get all in. And you don't have to win one extra chip and suddenly you're in a heads-up match.
Yeah, I agree, Norman. But I'm last. They are all ahead of me.
But they all have 4 big blinds, and I'm sure they won't be as cautious about those 4 big blinds as they should be. I don't think these players would think in a way that I have 5 big blinds, I have to be cautious because I don't want to go out fourth. I think they will do a lot of risky gambling moves at this point. So you see, if you're last and you're playing against the best players, then you're forced into doing a move because the best players will just wait you out. If everyone's very good, then everyone will just wait out the shortest stack. More or less, that's how it happens. But that is only assuming that the other 3 players are very strong. So in these tournaments, even if you're last, that's not a big issue if the other players, someone who's second place will lose their mind and go out before you. And that will happen quite often. So yes, I do think that hand I sent you, or I will send you, I think you will be maybe surprised by this, because this is in theory what cutoff can go all in with. And this is in theory what you can call on the dealer button. So if you first look what in theory cutoff could go all in, can you explain me if it's loose, if it's tight, and why does it make sense?
He can all in with 78% of his hands.
I mean, that's crazy in a way, right? But why he can do that in theory? What should happen in theory? Everybody should be folding because no one wants to, in theory, no one would want to gamble on the bubble. That would what happen in theory. Now in practice, I wouldn't go all in as loose as it allows cutoff to do because people won't fold. And if you already know they won't fold, then you're not scaring them off with an all-in. So the only reason this all-in for cutoff is so loose is that in theory, it should scare people off very, very frequently, 4 times out of 5 easily. Even if you knew cutoff has all these crappy hands, what does it allow button to call those?
Only queen offsuit and better.
Yes, essentially that ace-10 suited, it's also there, ace-jack suited. Even pocket 7s would fold, ace-queen, ace-jack would fold. You'd have to fold a ton of hands, and that the same thing would be true, by the way, for small blind and big blind. They'd also have to be extremely tight against an all-in who, if very good players are on the table, the cutoff could even say, I'm going all in here, basically blind. I'm going all in with almost anything. And still people would have to respect that to avoid a car crash, to avoid the scenario where you're gambling and if you're wrong, you get fourth. So yes. Now, if cutoff had folded, if he had folded, then I'll show you what you could go all in with. So if cutoff had folded, and this is what you could go all in with. And if you look at that, that is actually quite similar to your normal button opening range, right?
Yeah,
it's close, exactly. And if you would do that in theory, what do you think the other players should do? Should they be tight or should they not be? Well,
they should be tight.
They should also be tight. Do you think they will be as tight as they should be? Will your all in, let's say cutoff fold, you go all in, they should be trying to avoid that scenario. They should again fold very, very often. Do you think they will be as cautious as they should be?
Maybe. How do I know if they will be as cautious? They are not so good players, so probably they play a little more.
Right. I would also think that they probably have something like small blind has pocket 4s or ace-7 and decides to call your all in. So if they are going to be a bit more loose, that means our all-in will be scaring them less often or more often than we'd expect. And if our all-in scares them less often than we're expecting, then should we do it less often or more often?
Less often.
Less often, exactly. Because a big reason of an all-in is to, it's like it's in a way like a gentleman's disagreement, right? Where they're smart enough to not get into actual way of harming each other, right? They live. You're smiling about that. Why?
Because I have posted a video and it was about, and they had the idea to go in balloon, go up high in the air, and then start shooting at each other. And well, one of the balloons popped and the guy died.
Yeah, I mean, that's an all-in, right? That's like an all-in in tournaments. So surely sometimes, and there's certainly been times in history where people are, go to duels for almost any small issue and one of them dies. But yeah, in general, you know, you'd expect less often for parliamentary members or businessmen to get in actual fights than some drunk guys just close to a store somewhere or things like that, right? Usually you would expect that the more established higher class people would be better behaved and would know to walk away from situations to not cause unnecessary trouble. I mean, not always, but could be like that. So if I try to boil down the essence of what I'm trying to teach here, and I do think I think it's a crucial thing for you to be successful in these sits and goes, then really what is asked of you is to, like, the most of the play that's expected from you is not playing. That is like the most skill to learn. It's to be courageous going all in. It's not the skill to learn to be courageous, calling other people's all-ins or make crazy bluff.
Yeah, Norman, I know. But the thing, I fold a lot. And in one of my tournaments, I did fold so much when I was close to the bubble and low stacked. I kept folding and folding and folding and folding. And then I had to go in with a random hand and it didn't go in my favor.
How many players were left?
And I was still out. I don't remember.
How many players were left?
I don't remember.
But, you know, yes, sometimes it's going to happen.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating when you don't even have a chance because you get a random hand and the random hand is no good and then you lose. You know, it's not nice when the whole tournament is like this.
But what I'm proposing is, if you're going all in,
I know I should have folded my ace-8 offsuit, but it's just hard when you already do so much folding and you're already last and you tell yourself, and I was ahead. I knew that the guy didn't have an ace, you know? So I had 57.5% chance of winning. I knew that the guy would go in with something else than an ace. So I was a little ahead. I know it wasn't good enough, but I hate it when the whole tournament I just fold and then I get kicked out. It's no fun.
And what I'm asking you is to even fold more, right? To even be, if you have 15 big blinds and you have something like ace-7 offsuit or ace-2 suited, to be like, these guys are too loose, I'm just gonna fold even that one. I'm gonna even be even more tight. And if people go all in, also even more tight, right? That's what I'm asking from you, to be even more tight.
If I would have won that 8 with my ace-8 offsuit, I would be in a good situation. I think I would have been first.
You would have been, yes.
That would have been nice. Then there's a chance that I will play for the heads-up game. And
Very likely, yeah.
And then maybe my skill make me finish first.
Right, but you would also have these chances if you hadn't played this.
But the thing is, I'm last. I have a lot of pressure on my shoulders. I'm last, and if they keep going with one big blind and nobody kicks themselves and they don't knock themselves out, well, then it will be hard for me.
That can happen, yes.
I know what you say. I know it's right. I know I should have folded. Because it's the bubble. And he did put 4 big blinds on the table.
Yeah, what I want to draw your attention to, sometimes player 8 or player 1 also calls. Will you then be in a real big trouble or not?
Yeah, real big trouble.
So even in that sense, you already got lucky that player 8 and player 1 folded. But another time, one of them has pocket nines, ace, queen, they call, and then it's not even going to be close. Then it's just going to be a brutal end. Then secondly, he did have king, jack. You are a favorite, but I would draw your attention to that number 42.5. That's how often you get fourth place, right? So even though there's also a 42.5% chance of getting fourth place, which isn't very nice. I think you had better chances to get to top 3 than that.
You know, Norman, there's a button. It's called sit out. And if I press that bubble, I will fold a lot. I'm just kidding. I'm making fun. Sorry.
This is a good joke, and there's truth to it, yes? There are satellite tournaments, which could be that like top 3 places get a guaranteed price that is equal. And in tournaments like that, sometimes people actually sit out if they already have a lot of chips. Because they're like, well, there's 4 players left, I'm first place. I don't need any more chips, I'm gonna sit out, and all top 3 get the same price. So actually, there are some specific scenarios where that actually does happen, what to say, that people sit out and decide to not play any more hands if it's not required. It does happen sometimes.
Okay, Norman.
Yeah, I do get with you. It's not immediately fun, right? If you're already tighter than anyone on the table, and now I'm asking you to be even more tight, facing all-ins or going all-in yourself. But it does become fun when you see that in results, and next you know you're playing $10 and you see the fruits of the labor, right? It's not fun to put a seed into the ground in the spring and then take care of it the whole summer and you don't see anything for it. But when the autumn comes and you get the fruits of your labor, then that makes it all worth it. So it is a delayed gratification in a way, yes, that you have to be patient. You won't always be rewarded for it. There will be, just to remind you, I think I've said something like this, in tournaments where you don't get any good hands and finally you go all in for your last 7 big blinds and get knocked out, you get 5th place for all your suffering and you get nothing. But you still outlasted the other 4 players or 3 players. You still gave yourself a chance to see like 50 hands to have some opportunity there. And if you do it long enough, and if your worst finishes are 5th or sometimes 6th, but usually your bad finishes are 5th or 4th, and your good finishes are 3rd and 2nd and sometimes 1st, then over hundreds and hundreds of tournaments, if your worst finish is 6th or 5th, you will be very successful then. So but yes, sometimes it will be 10 tournaments. That's the mental side of poker, right? That sometimes it can be even a month straight. That sometimes poker, it's a month straight that you just get 4th place, 5th place, 6th place, and very rarely make top 3. That is really one of the like hidden secrets of poker in a way, that poker tests your resilience or belief in your morals or code. It's a bit like philosophy in that way, like Stoicism or somehow Japanese samurais come to my mind. That sometimes you have to follow your code and you don't see the results for it for a long time, but you have to have belief that what you do is logical, is smart, and it's a better strategy. And if you truly believe in that, then you would do the same thing even 100 times if it doesn't work. And that's rare, right? That's where people's doubt sets in, right? That usually it's way closer, right? Usually people 5 tournaments, they don't make top 3 and already they're like, I have to change something. I mean, you said with this tournament, right? 1 tournament, you didn't get any hands and you felt the pressure at the end of the tournament that I have to be better now. I have to play more hands. I have to change something up. The difficult thing is to believe the strategy that sometimes sometimes it's multiple tournaments where it doesn't show the fruits of it, but you still stick to it if you truly, but you have to believe in that. And to believe in that, it also has to make sense for you. And if it doesn't make sense, then I haven't done a good job explaining these concepts, but I'm overstating it, right? Clearly you are doing a lot of good things in these tournaments and making a lot of good plays. But I think this hand is a very good showing that, there can be a scenario sometimes where you fold 100 hands straight, you get pocket queens, and you have to fold even pocket queens. Or you have to even fold your aces, like a straight comes on the board, someone goes all in. It's really another secret is, I think, that big skill to develop is in a way you forget about everything else and just focus on this one hand that I'm going to try to play it as perfectly as I can with the knowledge in my mind. And really the one difficult mental aspect of poker is because all the luck and all the craziness that goes on, it draws our mind to it, right? Our mind is drawn away from our stoic principles or whatever. We see other people don't follow our principles. They don't read Seneca. They don't have this philosophy. And then it just, the world drags us with us that, okay, if other people do this, then I'm going to do it as well and lose what I believe in. And poker can be like that as well. You see a tournament, someone's been all in 3 times, and now you're thinking about that. Now you're thinking about those last 3 hands, and it's dragging you to be like that. You're like, well, I want to be all in 3 times. I want to get lucky. I want to do all these things. But really, in a funny way, if you just try to play every hand as perfectly, whatever happened the hands before, whatever happened 100 or 1,000 hands before, you got unlucky last hand. You had 100 big blinds, now you're down to 30. All of that really doesn't influence. And if you just focus on, I'm going to click the right button this hand, then if you do that decision 10,000, 100,000 times as good as possible, then it will show itself. But this is so common, I would say. You can't imagine how many students I have who I review tournament hands, and then the explanation starts with, well, 5 hands ago, I actually had way more chips. And then this stupid guy got lucky. And now I had little chips and I was angry about it. And I wanted to get back to the chips I had. And that's why I take this risk. And
Okay.
all of this is, it's a nice story, but if you do something, it doesn't hold up in court, right? If you do a crime and say, well, everyone did crimes against me, everyone treated me badly, that's why I did it. Or if you're rude to your friend and then find like, well, you were rude to me this time there, and now I want to do it back to
Okay.
your...
Okay, Norman, your time is off. I don't want to cut you off because I know that it's great to listen to you, and I could listen to you for 1 more hour. But unfortunately, you have a lesson right now. I want just to say a small thing. Next time let's make our lesson as normal. And if you want to look at the chart, just tell me, but let's make a break, give me a break so I can have enough time to look at my charts, think about what I'll say and what I try to explain to you. Okay? Just let's make poker, then a break, and then let's look at charts. Okay, next time or whenever you want. Okay.
Quick question: would you want to meet 1 hour from now to do, let's say, 20 minutes more of hand reviewing?
We could do that, but you don't have to. We had a plan.
I do want to do it. So if that's good with you, then I will see you in an hour.
Okay, then let's do that in 1 hour. Thank you, Norman.
All right.
You are great. See you. Bye bye.